Hello, everyone. Today we're joined by award-winning novelist and longtime MWSA member Kathleen M. Rodgers. She was named MWSA's 2024 Writer of the Year, and her novels explore family, friendship, resilience, and the meaning of home. Kathleen has published 5 novels, and her next book, The Llano County Mermaid Club, is coming out shortly. She's also a dedicated supporter of the MWSA community, always encouraging and lifting up fellow writers. Kathy, it's great to have you here.
Thank you, John. I'm excited to be here.
Great, great. So am I. Let's start with this. What has the MWSA community meant to you, both personally and professionally?
Well, you said it, it's community. From the time I joined, and I met you in 2009 in Orlando for that one big national conference. It's friendship, it's community, it's networking, it's lifting others up. And also, I didn't serve, I didn't wear the uniform, but my husband did. But it's being around people who are either veterans or military families or people who admire the military. And it's a good feeling, but
That,
it's definitely community.
that's good. Are there any special moments or anything that stand out in your mind, meeting with other MWSA folks?
If I could just say something about our founder, Bill McDonald, in 2014, we were at a conference, I think in Phoenix, and my youngest son was in Afghanistan, deployed there as a first lieutenant, and I was freaking out. And after the dinner that night in the awards dinner, we were all went back to the lounge and Bill did his magic. And I just started pouring out my mama heart. It's one thing to be a military spouse, it's another to be a military mama with a son in a war zone. And Bill really helped me. So it was also kind of a spiritual thing. But I mean, who would have thought that going to a writers conference and here's the founder of your whole assembly of people. He had a dream, he brought us all together, and then he helped me that night.
That's great. That's great. How about your recognition as you've won several medals and
Oh.
recently being our Writer of the Year? How has that impacted your writing?
Being named the writer of the year last year when we were all gathered in San Diego, I got up, I think I talked 2 minutes. I tried to be funny, and then of course, anytime I try to be funny, then I get emotional. And I, thanked everybody and also my long-suffering saint, my husband Tom, who's one of my biggest cheerleaders. It meant so much because so many of my friends have been writers of the year with MWSA, and I know what it stands for. Also, the military writer of the year was named in honor of our buddy Mike Mullins, who was a good friend. I loved him. He was always fun to be around, and it was just such an honor to be named not just writer of the year, but in honor and of his memory and with this great organization or society, as Bill named it, Military Writers Society of America.
That's great. Many MWSA members and writers write from a place of their lived military experience. How has your life as a military spouse shaped the way you tell your stories?
Oh my gosh. Almost all of my novels, except my latest coming out next month, there's no military in it. Um, Being a military spouse, and because you flew the F-111, when I married Tom a long time ago, almost 46 years ago, I learned right off the bat what it meant not just to be a military spouse, to be married to a fighter pilot. And all the glamour went right out the window 3 weeks into my marriage when someone in Tom's class, he had already transitioned to the A-10. He was killed over the desert. I heard about the accident on the 6 o'clock news in a little motel outside of the base. Didn't have a phone in those days. And let me just say this, Tom has lost so many friends in peacetime training accidents. It taught me early on that the military is a community. regardless of whatever, whether the spouse or the active duty service member, whatever they do, whether they're on the ground, ground support, whether they're in the air, from the mechanics down the medical facility. It's a community. And what I tried to do in a lot of my work, and before I got my first novel published in 2008, I wrote for Military Times and then Family Circle magazine. And the first two articles, the Family Circle, the big national magazine they bought for me, were military themed about military families. And Military Times was great. They gave me a great 6 years with them. And I wrote more about either the military family, or I did write about pilots. And I wrote about the emotion behind the men at that time, men in flight suits. There were no women flying combat then. Um, but I just John, I wanted to bring the military and the military family into the mainstream, particularly when I did it with the big national magazine Family Circle, because I knew that was on newsstands all over the country and in other countries. They had different, editions. And then when it came time with the novel, it was the same thing. I wanted to write what I called a mainstream novel, but with the military family somehow in there, where I didn't want to just limit my audience to just, oh, this is for military active service members and their families. No, I wanted everybody to know what it's like to be in a military family, whether it's in peacetime or when there's deployments halfway around the world in war zones. Um, and I want, and in my first novels, two of my main little characters are young boys. And that was fun to learn how to incorporate children characters into a story. I also wrote through the male viewpoint because my main character was a fighter pilot, and that was challenging, but I'm really proud of that novel.
Good, good. We were talking before about your upcoming novel, and so the Llano County Mermaid Club releases, I believe it's September 16th. Can you
They
share the?
changed the date. They
Oh, they
changed the
did.
date.
Okay. What's the new date?
It's September 23rd, so 1 week later.
Okay, okay. Gives you more time to prepare. Anyway, can you share the inspiration behind it and what readers can expect?
Okay, I'm going to cheat and read the elevator pitch. So, the Llano County Mermaid Club tells a story of childhood friendships, an adult affair, and the lost innocence of a group of young girls longing for the sea. Scandal, tragedy, and later darker discoveries make for an enthralling read. It's a coming of age. That's from my publisher, University of New Mexico Press. So, John, as you probably remember, I grew up in New Mexico, the land of enchantment. New Mexico, as most people know if they know their geometry, is a landlocked state. Like we don't have beaches unless they're at a lake. Um, so when I grew up, I was a little girl. I grew up in Clovis, New Mexico. A lot of people wanted to say we were more West Texas, but because we were on the east side. But water, going swimming, water in your lawn. In my family of six kids, water cost money. And so, we couldn't just go out and turn on the water faucet and, 105 degrees and just squirt each other down. It was, okay, we're going to do this at this time because water, the water meter, money. Um, I remember memories of going to the city pool, but like we didn't have a membership or we weren't members of a fancy club, and it cost money to get in. So there were all those memories of being a little girl living in the high plains, the desert area, and not being surrounded by water and what water really means. And now, water we know now either people don't have water or they have too much, with floods and everything. But that was one of them. I wanted to set a novel in the Southwest, but again, keeping in mind for a mainstream audience, I want readers from all over, all regions to read the story, but it starts out with three sisters and two best friends when they're young, and they form a secret club, and it's not to shut others out. It's so they can fit in. And books play a huge part in this story, how books can help us as we grow up, as we deal with life. And then the mother in this story, her name's Letty. Books and going to the public library were her early education before she ever got to go to college as an older adult. Excuse me, I've
Great.
got to get a drink of water.
Oh, that's fine. I may have to have some too. Well, let's move on to your fourth novel, The Flying Cutterbacks,
Okay.
where you blend the past and present to explore long-held secrets. What challenges came from getting those timelines together?
Okay, even with my latest book that's coming out and The Flying Cutterbucks, all of my novels, to a certain extent, deal with a dual, I call it a dual timeline. I weave the story back and forth from the present, whatever the present is, whatever day that is in a contemporary setting, to some time in the past. I think like that. My memories are like that. It comes natural to me to set my novels, you know, where the time is back and forth, almost kind of like a roller coaster. But I always think about my reader, and so I always try to orient the reader, especially ending one chapter and transitioning to the following chapter. I usually let the reader know right off the bat where we are time wise, and I do it usually in the chapter header or early on, just basically the day, the date, and maybe the month. It's just a natural flow for me, but the challenge is always keeping the reader in mind of, oh my gosh, I don't want the reader to say, wait, where are we? I thought we were in 1963. Oh, how did we get to 2017? So I'm always careful, and it has to do, for all you writers listening, it's the transition from that last part of the previous chapter and how you work that and how you open up this chapter. And it's kind of, you have to think of that in between space of turning this page, the reader who doesn't know ahead of time, and then opening this chapter, and then they start. So it's a challenge, but that's part of why I love to write novels. I've never written anything totally linear, and you've known me long enough to know I also don't think linear or talk linear. I think in circles.
Great. Let's see. Your novels often blend heartfelt realism with touches of magical wonder. How do you decide how far to take the magical elements?
Okay, magical realism. I love it. I always leave it up to the reader. I let them decide. In Johnnie Come Lately and the sequel, Seven Wings to Glory, it's my second and third novel, there's a cardinal, a small little red bird that's in both novels. He makes it into the sequel. And my character, Johnny Kitchen, when she's in her early 40s in both stories, but when she was 4 years old, she has a memory of being with her grandpa by a lake in North Texas, and a little red cardinal came up and started drinking right out, there on the lake shore. And she swears that that little bird looked up and called her Johnny, Johnny. That bird talked to her. And I leave that up to the reader, and the bird makes appearances at certain times. And every time that bird would make an appearance when I was writing, if I get goosebumps, if I tear up, if I laugh, it's all emotion. Everything has to be linked to emotion. If I'm not emotionally charged while I'm writing, if I'm bored, the reader sure is going to be.
That's a good tip. And it's not easy to do. And I guess it's also
No.
to keep the ambiguity in there. Let the reader
Yeah.
wonder whether this is real or is it in
Yeah.
the character's mind or whatever. So that's interesting. Let's move to some of your past experiences and how they're tying in to today. As you mentioned earlier, you've written for Family Circle, Military Times, a bunch of other magazines, anthologies. How does your
Mhm.
nonfiction experience shape your fiction?
In a way, John, it all goes together. Well, let me just say this. When I was writing more for nonfiction, but a lot of my work was first person narrative. So I was telling stories about either my family or something. That was a lot of what I did in Family Circle and mostly in Military Times. I learned just how to be the narrator of the story. Or in fiction, I step back. I've also written in third person, but it's kind of the same to me. It's dealing with emotion, writing with emotional impact, being clear to the reader. But I will say this, when I transitioned in 1992 to really trying to work on a novel, because I love the novel form, and I was proud of all my magazine and newspaper work, but I wanted to write a book. I wanted to be a book author. You know what? That first novel that grew up to be The Final Salute and won a silver medal from MWSA in 2009, that novel took 16 years. Now, no, I wasn't glued to this chair for 16 years. I was raising sons. Tom was had already started flying for American Airlines. You two have that in common too. Um, but when my kids were in school, I was in the office in this very room, different desk though. And I'm very lucky I got to stay home when they were young and I got to work on my books. But I had to learn that writing fiction was a whole nother animal than writing nonfiction. When I did write nonfiction, I would use quotes sometimes, so that helped. But really, when I transitioned to fiction, it took me a long time to figure out, especially the long story form. You know, I wasn't writing a 1,500 word article. I was writing like a 90,000 word story. And then that they talk about in novels that middle, it's the middle of the book where you can just lag. It just I revise that novel. I always tell people about over 100 times. I mean, I don't write draft after draft. I'm a wheel. I'm a slow wheel. I revise as I go. Writing experts usually go against that, but you know what? This is what a writer taught me a long time ago. Trust the process. And then I took it to one more level of trust my process. My process is messy. I'm embarrassed if people would see my chicken scratch notes. Um, but it's how I cobble books together. Lines come to me here just this morning, maybe because we were going to have our interview. I woke up at 5:30 this morning for the first time in a long time with a line on the novel that I'm supposed to be working on now for my sixth novel. And I'm like, oh, I'm tired. I'm just gonna go back to sleep. And then it's like, okay, get up. You know the drill.
Yeah.
I've got my little sticky notes, I've got my pencil. I take him into the bathroom, close the door so I don't wake my dog and Tom, and scribbled out the thoughts as they started coming. And as my thoughts were coming, it was that old feeling of, oh yeah, oh yeah, I'm working on a new book and I love this. And how am I going to work it in? I don't know, but that's my job as the writer. I'll figure it out.
We've talked about magical realism and the difficult, well, not difficulties, but the challenges of integrating it into the book. Let's talk now about hope. What role does that play, and especially when you're tying it together with trauma, family struggles, or social conflict?
Oh gosh, John, Hope, I kind of like to joke and say Hope is my middle name. It's not. My middle name's Marie, but oh my gosh, it hit me decades ago that if we don't have hope, hope for ourselves, hope for our loved ones, our friends, the world at large, hope for people we don't even know. What's the point? Even through tragedy, even through trauma, through sickness, through worry, there's always has to be hope. For me, hope could also be when it comes to my writing, the writing itself. You might also say I have goals. I have goals, but hope. You have to have hope when something bad happens. If we stay, I'm not saying that everything's hunky dory 10, 20, 50 years later when there's been trauma and loss, tragedy, any kind of loss, whether through death or changing someone's lifestyle, disfigurement, anything. Hope is what gets us up in the morning and makes life worth living. And that's what I try to do. And when I'm writing, especially in a dark, and I'm in a dark place in the book or the scene or things are happening to the characters, even when there's characters that I are, if you want to call them the villains or the antagonist, um, I don't hate them. I mean, they came from me. I created them, but then I always try to find that one thing like they're human too. We're all human. Even our make-believe characters are human. And hope, without hope, to me, what's the point? Hope is like breathing.
That's true. Interesting. So now I'm going to move maybe into an area that might be a little bit less comfortable. We've talked about
Okay.
some of the writing techniques and as a craft. I want to get a little bit more personal now and talk about your own personal journey and some of your inspiration and everything.
Okay.
We've heard about that you've been open about battling the imposter syndrome. And
Mhm.
even as a seasoned author, award-winning author, writer of the year, etc., it's still, I believe, an issue. How do you push past that?
Hello, I'm the imposter talking to you today, John. Let me wait for the real Kathleen M. Rodgers to walk through the door. The real writer, I don't know when she's going to show up. Yeah, that's how it works. Um, Here's what I can tell anybody out there who suffers from it, or even if you don't know you suffer from it. Um, when I say I suffer from imposter syndrome, sometimes it's like even when I was a little girl and I struggled in school and I was a slow reader, I was a reluctant reader. So I thought I was done. Still can't do math, but at almost 67, that's okay. Figured out how to, I have a husband that does it for me. No, joking. Um, Imposter syndrome is comes from negative self-talk, whether it's ourselves talking down to ourselves, or maybe people that didn't mean to talk negative when we're growing up, whether it's in our own families, at school, church, anywhere. Some of that stuff gets in us and it likes to get down there and live, sort of like bacteria. And once we recognize, and for me, writing, I declared myself a writer when I was about 15. I was in high school working on the high school newspaper. And no, I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I didn't really know what it meant to be a writer. Here's the key, John. I just kept doing it. I don't know how to be a writer. I've written 5 novels, fifth novel's coming out from a great publisher next month. I don't know how to teach writing. I really don't know how to write. All I know is that I just have to do it. And as I'm doing it, I'm in that process. And I guess it's writing by instinct and revising. It's all about revision too, but it's okay if you suffer from imposter syndrome. The key is to recognize it, stare it down in the face, like I'm staring at myself right now for a second, saying, Go away. You know you're not an imposter. Um, Last year, John, when you called my name, or Valerie, I forget which one of you called me up there to win the Writer of the Year, It was that moment. Even as I'm holding my beautiful plaque and I'm looking out at everyone and I'm looking back over here at you and Valerie standing there, um, there was that little voice of, oh, little Kathy, you're 5 years old and, you probably can't tie your shoes. Um, you're probably the dumbest one in kindergarten. You know what? You just, you just push through it. Does that help?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you mentioned that you weren't qualified. I can't remember exactly how you put it to be a teacher, but I think you're doing a great job. Those who are listening will take out
Thank
of
you.
your comments, and I'm sure it's going to help people. The other thing, when you mentioned about the struggles that you face, one of the struggles certainly applies to a lot of us, and that's rejections. Before your debut novel, as you mentioned in 2008, you spent 16 years facing all those rejections. What kept you going, and what advice do you have for the writers still at that stage?
Oh, thank you, John. It's the best question ever for any writer at any level. I maybe I'm an old stubborn mule. Even when I was a little girl and I felt dumb and stupid, something I never gave up. I didn't know that's what I wasn't doing, but what I would do, and I still do, and I did it for years when the rejections would come old school before we knew what the word snail mail was. It was just mail, in the mailbox. When those rejections would come, what that did to me is I would open up either, oh my God, please be an acceptance, even if it doesn't pay, or a lot of times it was either the form letter or at least it was personalized. I usually would come in and I hated it if my sons were home from school already or Tom was here. When I got rejections, I wanted to be alone because you know what? Uh, I probably cursed out loud to the universe, cried, but usually not crying. I usually got mad at, well, those people, they don't know what they're doing. I'm going to be the next greatest thing. They're stupid. You know what? After a little bit, I sit down, or I used to sit down, and I would take a look at whatever it was, whether it was a magazine story, a pitch to a magazine, just to want to write the story, or the novels. Then I would start looking. Sometimes it takes me 24 hours. And same thing in, say, writing groups, critique groups, when someone critiques me. I'm getting better at it, especially when you're contracted and an editor tells you this needs revised. You go, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. But a lot of times I need to process. Oh, well, I'm not as smart as I thought I was here. And usually, and I'm going to it's an emotional thing for me. I go through that process and then I come into acceptance of, you know what? I think it needs a little work. And here's the key also, the magic, the energy in our stories, whatever kind of stories we write, it's in the revision. Because so many times we think we've written the perfect page or the perfect sentence or the perfect paragraph, then we got to let it get cold for a little bit, or ideas, or we're pitching to an agent or an editor. Sometimes we have a little bit of time, sleep on it for a while, come back, we see it a little differently. I guess really just don't give up. Oh my gosh, John, I could have given up years ago, and that first novel never would have gotten published. It actually came out on my 50th birthday, and I started in my early 30s. And this room I'm in right now, it looked very different 33 years ago, but I've lived in this house 33 years. 33 years ago, I started that novel 1 week after we moved in. We still had boxes coming from the Air Force days into a suburban neighborhood.
You brought up an interesting subject that I'd kind of like to go back and talk about a little bit.
Okay.
You mentioned our founder, Bill McDonald, and I'm reminded, as you're well aware, that he originally set up MWSA with in mind encouraging veterans to tell their stories. And for a lot of them, it was a way to deal with issues like PTSD. So that's always something that we're looking to do
Yeah.
to help out the veterans community, to turn it around and
Hmm.
to make it more personal for you. You've been very candid about overcoming some of your personal challenges,
Hmm.
including bulimia and self-doubt, which we've already kind of covered. How has
Yeah.
writing contributed to your healing process?
Oh my gosh. I've had therapist in the past, writing. Writing's the best therapy. No matter what you're writing, whether you're writing in a journal and writing about what's really happening, or you're working on fiction or a magazine article, that kind of writing. Um, Even when you don't know that you're doing it, you're working through a lot of things that have happened in life. You can be thinking about something that happened to you, say in sixth grade, and you're still kind of, you know, upset about it, or that bully on the playground. That's okay, because decades later, you're working on a new scene that has nothing to do with the bully over here, but suddenly that bully appears and you change everything about the bully, and she or he turns to be something else in a scene. Everything's material, um, regardless. I don't know if I answered that.
No, I think you did. And I guess the best thing we can let our viewers and fellow MWSA members know that it's more than just writing. Sometimes, as you mentioned, it's a very good therapy. So even if your book isn't particularly successful, it might be incredibly successful in dealing with some of your own personal issues. Not that we're not suggesting everyone needs to do that, but it's a good side benefit of the writing process. Um, Let's move to we'll stop badgering you with real personal stuff, and let's let's move now. You mentioned your sixth novel. Can you give us a hint about the themes or setting?
So the sixth novel that I'm working on, I'm just a few chapters in, and then I kind of put it aside for a while. I'll be honest, I don't mind sharing that. Some writers say, write every day. You know what? I say, try to read every day. But then again, it's been a few months, things happen. I end up getting sick. I'm all better now. But so that work goes here, gets put on the shelf for a while. But when you come back, like this morning, I had these ideas. You come back with a fresh ideas, but the new novel, I am dealing with the theme imposter syndrome, and I'm going to give it to my main character. Her name's Kitty McCracken, and she's going to be a writer. And in this book, it's also going to be set in the Southwest, but with the idea of mainstream audience. Um, it talks a lot about what it's like to be a writer. I also go back to childhood, like in the novel that's coming out, how our childhood siblings or cousins or friendships affect who we become. And especially if you have very close-knit siblings or cousins or friends growing up and you still know them decades later, and other people, what happens to them? Do they go in completely separate ways, or is there still a center? Is there still something everyone has in common that can still bring them together? Is it a person, people, ideas, a place? Um, there will be a little bit of magical realism in this one, if you will, and I'm opening the book up like with the first sentence. I think I've redone the first sentence about 20,000 times. Um, I don't want to say too much about it because I realized years ago when I was working on the book that grew up to be The Final Salute, it used to be called Tucker's Ghost. I wish I'd kept the original title. But um, I would, I think in those days, I was younger. I was a mommy. I would go to take my boys to football, baseball, all these places, being in, group gatherings with other parents. And it's always an identity thing for me, is I didn't just want to be, oh, you're just a so and so or so and so. I wanted to maintain my identity as a writer. Now, that'll be going off on a tangent, but let me tell you, it wasn't always easy when Tom was active duty military. it was not always easy for me to write what I really wanted to write when he was still active duty. But that's also where the final salute came from. Um, I got mad at some things that happened, and we moved to Texas. Tom flew for the airlines, and it's like, now I can really write what I want to write. And so I did.
Well, it sounds like we'll just have to wait until the new book comes out to find out a little bit more about what it's about.
Right.
Let's move to I think our last question for today. If you could leave readers with or your fellow MWSA members with one feeling or message after finishing your books, what would it be?
Don't get too caught up in, will the book sell? How is it going to get published? Who's going to publish it? Will I go traditional? Will I get an agent? Will I go hybrid? Will I go self-publish? And also, don't get too caught up in, will it sell? How many books will sell? How many readers? This is how I decided. I had to learn this the hard way years ago. It's book by book by book, which really means reader by reader by reader. And if we can think of those people, we can't even see the audience. And it's just one individual who might one day get our book and open it up and either hate it and throw it across the room, or what we hope is they'll find something in our words that touches them here and that resonates with them, regardless of whether it's fiction or nonfiction or self-help.
That's good. That's good advice for everyone. First, I want to thank you for joining me today. We've known each other for a long time. You
We
mentioned
have,
being back together since Orlando in what 2009, something like that.
yes, 2009.
And so we've experienced a lot together. We look forward to our annual MWSA conferences where we can renew old friendships and that kind of thing. I know you feel the same way about that.
Yes.
So thanks. This was my first interview as an MWSA president and interviewer, but it's been fun. It's been great connecting and everything. So thank you so much for joining us, and I guess we'll call it a wrap. Thanks
Thank
again.
you, John, for having me.
Bye bye.